Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the NFL Draft Triple Take presented by UPMC. Mike Prisuta, Dale Lolley, and Matt Williamson ready to get you up to speed, at least at this early juncture, as we continue taking the deep dive into the NFL Draft. We're here today to talk offensive tackles. You hear me talk Steelers football on the DVE morning show and Steelers.com. Matt and Dale are the tag team on the drive, which can be found on SNR. And is that on Steelers.com too, or just
SNR? That is, yeah.
Yes,
and the app. Yep.
All over the place. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, wherever. Doesn't matter.
All of the Steelers social media platforms, you might say.
You might be able to say that, yes.
Indeed.
And I just did. Offensive tackles, it's a different year for quarterbacks, as we discussed in our first edition of Triple Take when we did the round one mock. But Matt, offensive tackles are always in demand, and this year, no difference there.
100%. And this year, because some questions at the top of the quarterback market and lack of just stud prospects in this draft overall. I mean, there's not a Chase Young in this draft. I think positions that are hard to find, like tackle, are going to be pushed up the board dramatically. So Steeler fans, you might think, boy, there's 5 guys that the 3 of us are going to talk about, and definitely going to be 3 or 4 of them sitting there at 20. Don't be so sure. They get driven up pretty quick.
Yeah, these guys are like unicorns. You like to find one, and if Steeler fans think that they're the only team in the league that has offensive line problems, well, that's just not the case.
It is not. But I'll tell you one thing I noticed about the most, if not all of these guys, the top guys, they have ill dispositions.
Yeah, that's true. There's some finishers.
They do not play a nice game. I mean, they to the echo of the whistle and then some, and a lot of nasty, a lot of get down and dirty. If you want a little attitude, this might be the year to get it. Dale, let's start with you. We'll count them down from number 5 to number 1. Tell us about your number 5 OT.
I got Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan at number 5. He's a native of Austria. Who started playing football for a club team in Vienna after he gave up on soccer. Can you imagine seeing a guy who's 6'6", 304 pounds? He wasn't 304 pounds when he was playing soccer, but I'm sure he was probably well over 6 foot tall. He came to the U.S. as a wide receiver and then went to Central Michigan as a tight end. He has a lot of just raw ability. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he really mirrors well, can move, light on his feet. Just needs to get a little bit stronger. Kind of, in some ways, kind of reminds me of another guy who played wide receiver and then went to tight end and then offensive tackle, Al Villanueva. He's kind of got that same, even has that same kind of walk that Al had, that kind of loping walk. You could just tell he's an athlete.
Matt, he's your number 5 as well. I've got Charles Cross from Mississippi State.
Okay.
And he impressed me. Watched him against Alabama, and he took on a bunch of different rushers and different size guys and guys coming around stunts and whatnot. Really seems to have an understanding of how pass blocking is done. You play for Mike Leach, you ought to have that figured out. And he's got the nasty to him, as does my number 4, and that would also be Matt's number 4 and Dale's number 4, Trevor Penning of Northern Iowa. Matt, why don't you tell us about him?
Yeah, I mean, I was torn between Penning and Raymond, and they're both very different. If you just want to mash people with size and physicality, that's Penning. If you want a Niners zone-based, athletic type offensive line, that's Raymond. And some people told me Raymond might run under a 4.8 at the combine.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah,
I believe that in a heartbeat. He can really move. Penning, to your point, Matt, you could play him on the left side. You could play him on the right side. I don't know that you could play Raymond on the right side right away.
Right.
He's strong enough to do that, but Penning is just nasty. Nasty.
If this football thing doesn't work out for Mr. Penning, I think Vince McMahon will be on the phone with him immediately.
Yeah, hell of a bar bouncer too, man. He could,
right.
He could star in the next Roadhouse and just toss people out of the bar left and right.
Oh, they better not make another Roadhouse. Some movies are done right the first time. That's one of them. Number 3, Dale's got Charles Cross from Mississippi State. Matt's got Charles Cross from Mississippi State. I've got a guy who's not on either one of your you guys' list. Daniel Fa'alele from Minnesota.
We got to talk about him.
6'8" and 1/8, 387 pounds. To paraphrase the movie The Bronx Tale, you don't walk with Daniel Fa'alele. You walk among him. He is massive, and he's part of a massive Minnesota offensive line. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but I watch a fair amount of Big Ten football.
No, really?
That's surprising.
Minnesota actually had a bigger offensive line, the Gophers, than the Vikings did.
It doesn't surprise me.
Height and weight, and they were ready to ground and pound this year. And then the Gophers had the misfortune of playing Ohio State in the opener, and they lost their top 2 running backs, and the season was kind of off the rails after that. But this guy, I'd love the way he just eclipses people. And he was so popular among his coaches and teammates. I don't know if you guys saw this or not. When they played West Virginia in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, they gave him the ball from the 2-yard line. He lined up at fullback, and he got to run into the middle of the line, and he scored a touchdown.
387.
I'm all about 6'8" and 1/8, 387.
From Australia. And another guy with an interesting backstory. We got a guy from Austria. We got a guy from Australia. There's a lot to work with here. I mean, he needs to work on.
There's a lot to work with.
right. You got to take a cab ride to get around.
Number 2, lo and behold, we have agreed again. Matt, why don't you tell us about Ekwonu? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. We'll try to figure this out as the draft process.
Amazingly enough, you don't hear a lot of offensive linemen mentioned on the broadcasts.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. Ekwonu, you said it right. I mean, is he powerful. I mean, he has rare lower body snap and power, and he too is a finisher and nasty. And frankly, I mean, at the very first pick in the draft, if the Jaguars decide we just want to mash people's faces, this might be the pick. I mean, he's a tackle, but he might be a Quentin Nelson like guard if he were ever given that chance. I mean, it probably won't get to that point, but there's a lot to work with here, and I think his best football is ahead of him too. I mean, especially as a pass blocker.
Yeah, he and Charles Cross are really young. They both just turned 21 years old, so they're still growing into their bodies, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah,
and staggeringly enough, we all agree on number 1 as well. Dale, why don't you tell us about Evan Neal, offensive tackle, Roll Tide.
Speaking of mashing, I mean, this guy is kind of the best of everything here. 6'6", almost 6'7", 360 pounds. Played the right tackle, played left tackle last year. Can handle that. He did it in the SEC, so you know that he saw a lot of quality edge rushers. Obviously practiced against quality guys every day. And when you take these Alabama guys, you know you're getting more of a polished product here, just because of the way they run things. Obviously, Doug Marone's their, or at least has been their offensive line coach, so he's been coached by an NFL guy, and he might be the safest pick in this year's draft. I think when we all did our mock draft, we all had him going number 1. That's for a reason. I think if you're taking that guy at 1, you want him to be, as safe as possible, and this guy is that.
Yeah, and Dale, as you alluded, if it's Ekwonu or Neal, if you're wondering how do we break the tie, which guy went to Alabama? Give me
right. That's what I was going to say. 3-year starter at Bama, guard, right tackle, left tackle, with a rare combination of size, power, length, athletic ability. What's on the
nastiness? Yeah.
Yeah, right. That'll work.
Yeah. Plus, he ought to be a little honked off after the national championship game, so maybe he's got a chip on his shoulder. Come to camp with something to prove.
Yeah, that's pretty big chip.
Big shoulder.
That's going to do it for our offensive tackles analysis. We've got a lot more of this stuff to come between now and the draft. To keep it here, I want to remind everybody that you can get this and any subsequent draft analyses on all of the Steelers' social media platforms. Until then, for Matt Williamson and Dale Lolley, I'm Mike Prisuta. You've been listening to the NFL Draft Triple Take presented by UPMC.